Ladies and gentlemen, good evening for those who watch this stream from Europe, from Central Europe. It's 9 p.m., 15 minutes past 10 p.m. in the evening, and my guest tonight is Frodi Midjord from Scanza Forum. Hi, Frodi. I'm really thankful to you that you accepted my invitation because I was so late with all the invitations. I sent invitations also to Dr. E. Michael Jones and Jared Taylor, but I was really too late. Maybe Dr. Jones will join us later on, but I doubt it. So Frodi and I will be alone tonight, chatting about the American situation. Hi, Frodi.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. It's always great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same for me. Frodi doesn't have his camera tonight, so he'll be joining us with his voice only. Frodi, how how do you see the current American situation right now? The situation with elections, the situation with the Capitol, with the events on the Capitol in Washington. Yeah, what's your view on the current American situation?
I can't say I'm very surprised by the overall picture, by the trajectory of what's going on. I didn't expect Trump to be able to turn the election around. I mean, and with regard to fraud and cheating in the election, I think pretty much everyone agrees that there was fraud, but I think the only thing that people disagree on is if it was enough fraud to turn the election around. I mean, if it made a difference or not, right? So I think that's what people disagree on. But I didn't think that Trump was going to be able to turn it around. And finally, he conceded that he had lost the election and that he's no longer going to be president after January 20th, I guess. What has surprised me more than the overall picture of what happened is how quickly things have happened. I think that we've all seen the direction things have been moving in over many years, but what's happened in the last just 2 years is things have speeded up, really. I think we live in a different world today than we did a year ago. And a thing like Twitter banning Trump while he's still president, I think that just sets a new standard. Because with social media giants like that, they have the same they have more power than politicians do. I mean, and they are unelected. And when they say that they ban extremists or fringe people, unknown people, I think that a lot of people are convinced by that and think that, well, that might be justified. It might be okay because we don't want to have extremists on public media or social media anyway. But when they ban the president of the United States, I think that's a sign of things just escalating very quickly, and it's a symbolic thing. I mean, it is the modern day version of the Banana Republic. The new president kills the old president or hangs him or puts him on trial or something like that. I mean, I think America has really shown in this past year that it is collapsing. It is not anymore the kind of country that people around the world look up to. I think a couple of decades ago, many people looked up to America and wanted to copy what America has done. But I think that image is now gone. I think it's not really taken seriously anymore. I mean, it's still a big and very influential and powerful and rich country in many ways, but as a cultural force and as an image that other people want to imitate, I think it's lost its power of attraction in many ways.
Is it is it in any way connected with the fact that the Democrat Party stopped being a patriotic party a while ago, and now probably all the politicians in the Democrat Party are basically globalists who don't care about the fact that America or American empire is losing, and I don't know, the China empire is getting bigger, better, and will prevail. What do you think about?
Well, I'm not so sure that this is a Democrat versus Republican issue in any way. I mean, on the surface it is, but on a deeper level, I think the major crisis in the West and in America is that both these parties, both sides of the political spectrum in the mainstream, agree on the fundamental values, the fundamental issues. And the fundamental values that govern the entire West, the entire modern world, is universalism and individualism. And I think what we're seeing is, well, obviously those values are wrong. They are a flawed description of how humans are, but that is the ruling ideology. And I think that when people on the right of center, when they try to portray themselves as good, they appeal to those leftist values. I mean, both parties agree on the fundamental values. That's why the so-called right, that's why the Republicans are unable to fight. That's why they're unable to be assertive in any way. And that's what you saw when you compare the endless riots that we saw in the spring, where they burned down cities, where they killed dozens of people, and when they destroyed property, when they attacked the police officers knelt, they went down on their knees. The National Guard went down on their knees for the rioters. And the mainstream media made up excuses for them. The politicians made up excuses for them. But when this thing happened in the Capitol on the 6th of January, everyone, including people in the sort of Republican camp, even Trump, everyone condemned these protesters, right? So I mean, and that is because the mainstream right in America lacks all moral conviction. They don't have any moral conviction. They don't believe. They don't have a moral conviction that they are right and the enemy is wrong. So that what is important to mainstream right-wingers in America is to play by the rules and be fair and be polite. And this is something that has made me angry to no end in many years. Over many years, because the point is that they don't want to win. It's been said before that the left uses democracy as a tool, as a means to an end, and the end is power. They use democracy as a means to reach power, whereas people on the mainstream right use democracy as an end in itself. It isn't important to reach power. The important thing is that the game is played fairly and that they are accepted and not seen as immoral by their enemies. And of course, the enemies of the right, the leftists, they will only see what you do as acceptable as long as it leads to you losing, right? They will never see anything as acceptable if it is effective, if it is powerful, if it leads to an increase in your power. I just think that it's a moral collapse of everything on the mainstream right. And if there's any sort of light at the end of the tunnel, it is that these issues are crystallized and they become clearer in people's minds, and they see the need for a completely different leadership in the right. And I think a lot of people who have sort of routinely voted for the Republicans, a lot of people in America who have thought that Trump is going to save the day. I think that they've had a rude awakening, and they realize that something completely different is needed in order to create any meaningful change at all.
Did even Trump throw his greatest fans and the most loyal people to him under the bus after his statement after the Capitol events?
Yeah, he did. And the point is that what has made Trump an interesting figure, I never believed that Trump would, in office, that he would create any meaningful change in any way, that he would change the game, that he would, save the day, or that he would be a god emperor or something like that. That was just a meme. He never represented that. What I liked about him was that he was sort of irreverent, that he was disrespectful to the leftist media, that he didn't play along with their narrative, that he was completely unapologetic to them. And that is the only way to win. You cannot win. You cannot win by appealing to the approval, by seeking approval from your enemies. And that is what all mainstream right-wingers have done. And that was so refreshing to see that Trump didn't do that. He called them out. He said they were the enemy. They are not sort of a balanced, unbiased media. No, they are part of the enemy camp. And he called them out on it. And he was completely unapologetic. But that he didn't have that energy. He didn't have that energy left, and the left never does that. The leftists, the mainstream left or the radical left or anyone on the left, they don't condemn their most fanatical supporters. Trump condemns his most fanatical supporters, and on a sort of energetic level, on the level of a subconscious level, that is a sign of weakness. If you see this as, humans are animals. I mean, we're humans, but we're also animals. And that means that you can see body language in other people. You can see signs of weakness. You can see signs of fear. And when right-wingers act out of fear, that is just a sign of weakness. And that will mean that people will stop following them. So you have to just show strength all the time. You're not allowed to show that weakness. You're not allowed to show that fear. But that's how everyone saw Trump. They saw that as a sign of fear and as a sign of weakness. And it's pathetic. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. And if you compare the amount of violence that was committed by these Trump supporters on January 6th, with the violence committed by the leftist extremists in the BLM and in the Antifa, etc., during many months in 2020. I mean, there's no comparison. There's even a video of these right-wingers being the whitest possible thing, namely cleaning up. They were picking up empty bottles and cleaning up after the riot because they're so white. They're so wholesome. It's sort of a parody. I mean, it's a parody. It's like we never learn.
Do we on the right have to have a discussion about the meaning of the words fascism, National Socialism, extreme right? Because it seems to me that at least the mainstream right doesn't even know what the right means and what a right brought to its extremes means. Because I heard plenty of this supposedly smart commentaries about Twitter censoring Donald Trump and so forth, and they all brought this idea to front that This is left fascism. Fascism is coming back, and it's coming back again from the left, as if fascism was really a left wing ideology. This is a libertarian idea that fascism is really a left wing ideology because it's not totally free market or something like that. That's a because it's collectivism. All the libertarians and the so-called right wingers that watched Dinesh D'Souza once in a lifetime think that that fascism is a left-wing ideology, and not only that fascism is something that has to be totally condemned. But these right wingers think fascism has to be condemned and communism has to be condemned. They both have to be condemned, and then we can play this game of democracy. This is what this mainstream right wingers think. But the Democrats, the mainstream left wingers, they don't play the game in the same way as you already said before. They don't care about communism, killing, murdering. They don't care about anything. They just care about winning this game. What's your stance on fascism, National Socialism, and this right wingers um, saying these silly things about leftism?
Right. There's a lot going on there. George Lincoln Rockwell, who was the head of the American Nazi Party back in the 60s, he once said a thing that I've always remembered, and he said that he has more respect for a communist than for a conservative, because a communist will go to the electric chair and die for what he believes in, but a conservative will run away scared if you call him a racist. And I think that can sort of help you predict what the outcome will be in this political struggle and this political conflict. It is, again, like I said in the beginning, it's the moral conviction. Do you actually believe that you are right? Do you believe in what you're saying? And this is the problem, again, on the emotional level, on the subconscious level, that the leftists, they play to win. Always they play to win, and this is what William Pierce called the death by halves of conservatism, that these sort of mainstream right wingers, they go to the negotiation table and they always back down. And if they just lose half, what he said, William Pierce, basically, he said that when they go to the negotiation table and the communist, the leftist, he wants all of what you have, and what you want is to retain what you have. And if you retain 50% of what you have and he just takes 50% away from you, then both of you think that you were successful because he gained 50% and you were able to retain 50%. You didn't lose it all. And then you go to the negotiating table again the next time, and he takes 50% of what's left, and then 50% of what's left. It's a death by halves, right? And that is how these mainstream right-wingers, that's how they work. That's the mainstream or the conservatives, call them what you want. We all know what it is. And it's these people who are afraid because they're bourgeois. They are the most important thing to them is to be respectable and polite. It doesn't matter what their enemy does to them. The enemy can rape their children. They care about being polite and being respectable. So when the left goes into the fight, they play to win, no matter dirty tricks, no matter nothing. When the mainstream right-wingers go into the game, they play to be to get a pat on the back, to be the good boy. They play for the approval of their enemies, even that they have to be seen as upstanding, decent, moral citizens and always polite. And it's a completely different attitude. So, I mean, that's that. When it comes to fascism, I think fascism and National Socialism are antiquated terms. I don't think we should sort of try to reclaim them and we should call ourselves fascists or anything like that, because I think that's sort of being reactionary in a way, right? If they call you something, well, I'm just gonna embrace it. I'm just gonna accept that term and call myself that. I don't think you should do that, because I think we live in a completely different world today than we did 100 years ago. So I don't think that fascism as an ideology sort of describes the situation we're in. In many ways, National Socialists and fascists in the 30s fought the same fight we are fighting today. I mean, I'm just saying it. That's how it is. That's simply a fact. They were fighting against many of the same principles that we are fighting against today. I just don't think that we should be afraid of being called that name. I don't think it should. We need to sort of defang that attack. It's like it's magic words. It's shut up terms. They call you a name in order to shut you up. And you need to sort of lower your pulse. You need to be not afraid of being called a fascist or whatever. I don't care what they call me. I really don't. So yeah, but I do think that we need to understand how this works, because they are always on the attack, and you can't win a fight by defense alone. You can't just defend yourself and say, I'm not this, I'm not that, while the enemy is just throwing projectiles at you. And that is what people are doing. That is why people are afraid of being called fascists, although it's completely irrelevant. 99.99% of the people using the term fascist or being called the term fascist have no idea what fascism is. It is simply a magical word. It doesn't have a meaning in this context. It's a thing that Trotsky came up with. I mean, at least he's been credited with it, that he came up with this strategy of, okay, everyone who doesn't fit our standards, our political standards, we call them fascists. That is a sort of a political mental mind game that he came up with, and people have continued doing it ever since. And the only way of making it less effective is if you're not afraid of being called anything. I mean, you can't play their games. You can't let them set the rules. You have to define your own terms, and you have to be offensive. You have to attack. You can't, I mean, basically never defend yourself, never explain yourself. If they call you names, never explain yourself. Attack them instead. That's the best that's the best strategy.
Yeah, I agree. My addition to the use of terms fascism and National Socialism is, of course, German National Socialism and the Italian fascism brought with themselves also Italian and German imperialism, and Italian and German imperialism meant different things for different nations and different countries, and we can have historical discussions about that. And in this context, we say that National Socialism was bad for one nation and good for another nation, and so forth and so forth. But what I would also like to add is that we, the right wingers, must always also be aware of the fact that National Socialism and fascism, with all its also bad things, were historical reaction to communism. They were the historical reaction to communism when our idealistic, or for our bourgeois minds, optimal states, as for example for us Slovenes, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Of course, Austro-Hungarian Empire is for Slovene traditional Catholic a much better thing as Nazi Germany or fascist Italy. Of course, we always prefer Austro-Hungarian Empire, but our Austro-Hungarian Empire gave up against communism, and National Socialism and fascism were practically the only decent reactions towards communism winning over the Europe. Wouldn't you say that?
Yes, I
Historically.
mean they took a gun to a gunfight. I mean the communists were taking over. It was a reaction to communism. It was a reaction to many things, but it was primarily a reaction to communism. Yes, and they united many countries in Europe in the Waffen SS to go fight Soviet imperialism, etc. So I mean, and it's that's what I mean, that it's not a sort of strategy to avoid being called something that we really are. Is that is something that happened in a very specific historical context. We're not dealing with communism today. We're dealing with totalitarianism, a different kind of totalitarianism that in many respects maybe looks the same and works the same way as communist totalitarianism, but in many respects it's different because it's so technological. We are really supervised. And I said this to a friend earlier today. If you told the average, it doesn't matter if you're on the right or on the left, if you told the average person in the West in the 90s, in 95, that the police would enter your home to make sure that you don't have friends over. I mean, this is the level of tyranny we see today in England. You're not allowed to have family over for Christmas. You're not allowed to go out. You're not allowed to do anything. And yeah, it's because of the COVID situation, but they're tightening the screws more and more. We're just going into a situation where we are losing power over our own lives in many ways, and we're going into this high-tech dystopia. And I don't think that the strategies of fascism and National Socialism are applicable. I think that if you read Mein Kampf, for example, I think you will learn probably more about how politics works than you can learn from any other book. Because he was he had a very clear vision of how political psychology works, but it's not the same situation. So yeah, we can learn from the historical situations, but we have to understand that those were very specific movements, and we can't repeat anything that they did, because, well, first of all, they were a reaction to the First World War, where veterans came back from the front after the Great War, and they had to fight communist takeovers. I mean, it's soldiers coming back from war, having to fight against people who had taken over their countries while they were away fighting. So I mean, that's why you had street fights, you had street brawls. It was a very specific situation, and I don't think we can sort of really copy it to our times. But I do think that many of the same sentiments were at play.
Yeah, I do think that, yeah, if you had a right wing government during the epidemics, as we had in Slovenia, for example, the right wing governments are mostly democratic governments, as we spoke before, because the mainstream right wingers are really Democrats. They are Democrats. They are the ones that are really keen to play the game of democracy. And this is why all the countries that had right wing governments during the epidemics, the right wing governments didn't use the epidemics to gain more power. The same is with America, for example. I would really be scared if epidemic started with Joe Biden and in the White House. I really sincerely think that that left would try to use the epidemics to gain a lot more power. What do you think about this thought?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think Joe Biden should be underestimated. I think I think there is a tendency, and this is a very sort of there's a sort of a plebeian mentality almost that you confuse a person who has good rhetoric and who speaks very smoothly. I mean, Trump he's witty, he's quick, he's good in debates. That's not the same as being a shrewd politician. I think that yeah, Joe Biden he might come across as as an idiot, and he stutters and he isn't very smooth in debates, but he knows the political game. He has been playing the political game for a very long time. And I don't think he's an idiot. Not a chance. He knows what he's doing. And he is a massive establishment figure. He has the establishment. He can do what he wants, basically. So he's not popular, but you don't have to be popular. You don't have to be popular. You have to know how the game works. I think Trump has a different background than Biden. I mean, he has been a very successful businessman in his life, in his career. But I think that he took the establishment by surprise in the previous election, but in this election he didn't. And I think that they won out because of that. And they played dirty, but in the end they won. So, yeah, I definitely think that Biden will take advantage of the situation. I think the entire globalist establishment will continue taking advantage of the COVID situation. It's not a coincidence that the mass media thinks it's a huge deal that now the virus has mutated. Now there's a new version of the virus, when the old version has lost its power to intimidate people and keep them in fear because everyone. Okay, I'm in Sweden. And in Sweden, people go to restaurants. People don't wear masks. I don't see dead people lying around in the streets. I don't see panic and chaos in society. It's a completely normal society. They haven't had a lockdown. They haven't done anything. And it's still a normal society, and that shows you how dangerous this virus is. That shows you that all these massive lockdowns, when people are kept prisoners in their own houses, it's not really well motivated. I mean, it just isn't, because the empirical evidence is here. We don't see any sort of Black Death situation in Sweden that doesn't have a lockdown. So, yeah, I think that definitely the corrupt politicians are taking advantage of the situation. I'm not one of those, conspiracy theorists who think that they created the whole thing. It's all part of the matrix. I think that what they do is they take advantage of situations as they appear.
Samuel Gok says Biden's still not in the office, and they haven't won till Biden takes office. Not saying, just saying. Do you think that anything can still happen, in the sense that?
I think so. I think Samuel Gog is very optimistic, and I admire that and I like that. But Trump has publicly and conceded the election and said that started transition of power now. And I don't see any way of turning that. It's maybe if the Earth was hit by a meteor that killed Biden, something like that. I don't think there's anything that's going to happen. No, but not that matters too much. I don't think that it matters too much who is in the White House, because, like I've said many times before, I think that the important part of Trump the value of Trump is in meta politics. That is in how he changed discourse. Because the fact of the matter is that you have to change culture, you have to change discourse, you have to change the way people think and speak before you can change how they act, what happens in society. You have to change which topics are at the top of the agenda or at the in people's minds, and what is seen as the most relevant issues. You have to change what can be said. I mean, there is this Overton window in society which describes, or which is a sort of a description of what can be said in polite society. What can we discuss? What can be said without you seeming like a lunatic? And that has shifted. I mean, Trump has shifted the Overton window. I mean, that's just a fact. It's simply a fact that he has made issues relevant to the right, that he has made those issues top relevant issues that are now, I mean, race, he doesn't talk about race, but race has, since, because of him, all these race riots, etc., it's become the most relevant issue. I mean, we're talking about these issues all the time. We don't talk about anything else. So I mean, it's had a metapolitical impact that cannot be ignored.
Something more actual and concrete. Do you think that what happened on the Capitol was that centrally planned from the left wing? How could that even happen? What happened on the Capitol? Do you have an idea?
No, I mean, I don't have any inside information. I think that it's probably a huge mix of things. I think you can't see the mistake people make in when judging these situations, and when they see conflicting facts and conflicting pieces of information, is that they think that, well, someone set it all up, and it can be a mix. There can be some quote unquote enemy agents in a crowd of hundreds and thousands of people. Of course, there can be some of them who do a thing here and there, but I think it was a genuine protest. I mean, I've talked to people who were there. It was a genuine protest. I've seen videos of them being let in peacefully. They didn't sort of break in to the building. And yeah, there is a distinction. This is something that I tweeted, that there's a distinction between reality and hyper reality. I mean, this is the thing. This is why we go to the cinema. This is why we go to the theater, because our minds aren't evolved to make a distinction between actual reality and simulated reality. If you see a horror film or a thriller on TV, your heart races. You become sort of tense. You get the emotions as if you were there, right? And that is the function. And that is the function of media, of news media as well. They portray an image a certain way, and they do it to get an emotional effect. And I definitely think, of course, they had an agenda there, but they don't have to orchestrate anything, there on the ground. They can orchestrate things in how they portray it. So, I mean, you don't have to overstate your case, really, to say that there's corruption involved here, because the corruption is in the part of the media. Just like I said, they downplayed all the chaos, all the violence, all the destruction that happened during months and months and months all over America in 2020, and they downplayed that and said, "Oh, that's just exaggerated. It's mostly peaceful. It's mostly peaceful." It's a ridiculous term, but now it's not mostly peaceful anymore. Although it was obviously mostly peaceful. I don't think you could find videos of Black Lives Matter activists picking up empty bottles, after their riot. I think it's a completely different mentality. I mean, it's a different personality type. This is also a thing that's very relevant, that politics isn't about theories and arguments and logic. It's about personality types as much as anything else. Some people are hardwired for just complete destruction of society, and some people are hardwired for order and for making things work. I mean, it's been said many times before. I don't know where this originally comes from, but I mean, if you made a thought experiment, and tomorrow everyone who voted for the left would vanish from the face of the earth, you would still have a functioning society, because all the people keeping the country going, they vote for the right. If you made the opposite thought experiment, and everyone who voted for the right just vanished, and you just have quote unquote left-wingers left, you'd have a chaos. You wouldn't have anything working anymore. You would just have complete destruction in society. You would have drug addicts and prostitutes, and you wouldn't have any of the people on the plus side left. And I just think it comes down to personality types, and there's a lot of genetics. There's a lot of biology, there's a lot of culture, there's a lot of stuff going on there, and I don't think it comes down to arguments in the end and logic.
Or it comes with the people that clean the stores after the looting. The people that clean the stores looting like arguments, but those that don't, they like arguments a little bit less.
Yeah. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Yeah, we're not all the same, says Invoke Prejudice.
No,
okay.
We're not.
Frodi, what is your prediction? What comes next? What should right-wingers do? Will Parlay or Parler and the Gap, will they work for us the same way as Twitter? Do we have to find some other platforms? Will there be any platforms for us left after the new government, the new combined government of Biden and China Communist Party? I'm joking a little bit. It starts ruling the world.
Yeah, I had a talk with F. Roger Devlin a few months ago. We talked about Sam Francis's book, Leviathan and Its Enemies. And what he talks about in that book is that you can't talk about society in terms of democracy anymore, that the people vote, and they vote for a party, and that party represents, that vote, and that's who runs the society, who runs the country. Because a modern society is more complex, it's a mass society. America has a population of more than 300 million people. It's a massive country. It's very wealthy, and it has influence over what happens in many other countries as well. What you have to understand is that the person who is voted into office only has a little bit of the power, because there are three elements in political power in a modern society, or in power. One branch is the managerial state, and basically it's a massive bureaucracy. And you don't change the bureaucracy when you get a new guy in office. You just change the president, you change the administration, etc. But you still have a massive bureaucracy that's already there, and that's controlled by a culture and values, etc. So that's one branch of power. Another branch of power is big business, big tech, and they have massive power. No one votes for them. No one votes them into power. And then the third part is the media. I mean, culture and media, and all those seem to work hand in hand, and especially with Biden. This was something that was fascinating to me. That before the election, weeks before the election, you had Zuckerberg and you had Twitter announcing that be careful if someone announces a false election result. we will stop people. I mean, it's like, oh, so you knew there was going to be fraud and there was going to be a contested election? I mean, they apparently these big tech companies, they warned us ahead of time that this was going to be a contested election, which means that they are a part of the game, and we know that. But I mean, it's more and more of this just gets out into the open every day. And I just think it's important to point it out to people that this is not a hidden secret thing. This is something that is out in the open. This is where the power lies. And what can right-wingers do? Well, I remember, I mean, I've been in the radical right, or call it what you will, for a couple of decades. I was following the radical right before the internet became a huge thing. I mean, in the late 90s, you had to order things online, or not online. You had to order them through mail order. You had to order a journal or a magazine or a book or something and read it, and it reached a few hundred people. Then the internet came, and all of a sudden it was sort of an equal playing field, and that made the right huge in comparison. I mean, it was completely irrelevant back then because it only reached a few people who actively had to seek it out, right? I mean, if you wanted to read American Renaissance or something like that, or what Jared Taylor wrote about, you had to actively order things from him. And that is, I mean, it was a complete game changer when anyone could just put up videos and they reached hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, now we have people who are anonymous who just have an alias who reach hundreds of thousands of people. That was a game changer. And I think that what's going to happen now is that the cat is out of the bag, sure, but I think we're going to go back to the old normal where we have to accept that, just as in the 90s, you had the big mass media companies running the television stations and the newspapers, and they controlled the narrative completely. That changed a decade ago or 15 years ago. That started changing when people, started blogs, people started YouTube channels and podcasts, etc. over the last 10 years. And that has been a game changer, but I think that they have realized, okay, that gave away too much of their power, and now they're taking it back. So we're going back to the old normal again, where we have to we have to do things the old way. And I think that's just how things are going to continue for a while. But I think that we are going into totalitarian times that we can't imagine, really, because I think the human mind works this way, that we think that things will go on approximately like it is right now. That's how it's going to be a year from now and 2 years from now. We don't anticipate massive change. Myself, in February 2020, I didn't anticipate that we would live in this prison society, in isolation in many countries, where people aren't allowed to visit their family members for Christmas, right? I mean, we don't anticipate massive change like that. But what is different now from the Soviet Union time or whatever is that the technology has developed so that now, I mean, people who think that democracy is the greatest thing that ever existed, they will talk about feudalism in the Middle Ages and how a dictator, a king, controlled everything. Well, he never encountered you. I mean, there's no technical possibility that he could have anything to do with what you do in your everyday life. I mean, he might demand that you join his war or something like that, but on a daily basis, no one would interfere with anything you did because they couldn't. But now people can control where you are through your mobile phone, and they can control everything in detail. And for these people, power is an end in itself. And when they can tell people that you're not allowed to travel, you have to have a digital COVID passport, you have to, we're going to force you to take this vaccine. They love telling people what to do. That's how they work, and it's not because they perceive themselves as evil. It's because they're ruled by this sort of hubris. They think they know better. than everyone else. They love telling people what to do. I mean, if you're in a normal office, you'll encounter people like this, like middle-aged women or something like that, who just think that they know best because they're, I mean, it's just a personality type. And I think we're going into um, a totalitarian territory that we sort of can't imagine, because we're not going to be allowed to spread our point of view, and we're not going to be allowed to gather in groups as we've done before. And I think we're just going to have to, it's going to be more, more like Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago, that kind of situation.
Does that mean that the debate between Jared Taylor and Dr. E. Michael Jones in Zagreb won't happen?
No, I mean, my intention is still to do it as soon as we're allowed to travel again. And we don't know. I mean, I have no idea how 2021 will play out. I simply have no idea. But I think both me and Jared Taylor and E. Michael Jones, we have our mind set on making this debate happen, because we all want to meet up. And a lot of people in Europe are very much looking forward to meeting both Jones and Taylor, and it has a great value to just be able to meet face to face. There's something dystopian about. So this is something that sort of came to mind during this sort of lockdown situation. That in the 80s, this wouldn't have been possible. You wouldn't have been able to tell people you're not allowed to go out, you're not allowed to do anything, because you would become restless. People would do it anyway. They wouldn't just do as they're told. But now, so much of life is based on the internet, and people live their lives through the internet. So that, unfortunately, it's a sad thing. Many people's lives didn't change too much during the lockdown, because they were already living like that in isolation and just interacting through the internet. I think that a true right-wing movement has to counteract that, and we have to meet up in real life. We have to form real human connections, because I think that that's one way you can distinguish the right from the left. The left is against everything that's human. We need everything, all the normal human things. That's what we stand for. The left wants these weird, theoretical, utopian, crazy things. We want normal human interactions, family life. It's those things that we stand for.
I see that many Americans are very disappointed with Donald Trump. That many of his followers felt betrayed by him after he got betrayed by Mike Pence. But would there be any such right-wing resurrection? It started back then in 2015 if there weren't for Donald Trump.
I think that in those years, 2014, 2015, 2016, I think those were massively important years for the radical right, or for the right in general. You had the migration crisis, so-called, the massive invasion of Europe. That's just when it became apparent to everyone that this is going to be a disaster. That forced many people to realize that we have to do something about this. So that's one of the trends. The second thing was Brexit. I mean, that is a question of should we have national sovereignty or not? So, I mean, that was a big issue, and that was a populist issue, because that was, in a sense, the elites, the mass media, told everyone Brexit is a horrible thing. It's a very bad thing. Everyone has to be a part of this new sort of globalization thing. And but people still voted against the elites and voted against the media. That was a huge encouragement to everyone who is on the right and who is against the mass media establishment. And then came Donald Trump. And like I said, I see Trump mostly as a metapolitical force, a force to change discourse, and a symbol. And what he symbolized was that he said, okay, immigration is a problem. We have to stop immigration. And he was against the left-wing mass media. He called them out on it, and they hated him. They were crying, they were hysterical, they were freaking out. And just the satisfaction of the candidate winning and being people voting for him, although all the elites said no, you're not allowed to vote for him, but people did it anyway. Those things, these are sort of intangible trends, but they have a massive effect. When you combine these three trends, that just brings national sovereignty and the problems of immigration and globalism versus local society. It brings those issues to mind. I mean, it's those issues become very at the top of people's consciousness. That they become very relevant in public discourse, in political discourse, and I think those three things made it possible for the radical right to sort of surf those waves, and our issues became prominent. There are so many people. I mean, like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, but so many people that I see today first became involved in those years. So yeah, I do think it was relevant, and I do think that when people are very disappointed in Donald Trump, I think they just expected too much because they don't understand the political. So this is what I've said, and this is something that I've said since before Donald Trump was elected back in 2016. And I said that, so this is how democracy works. When a candidate wants to be elected, he has to appeal to the people. He has to speak to their desires, their interests, etc., to be elected. Once he is in office, that doesn't matter anymore, because once he is in office and once the political the political situation is sort of established, it's only lobby groups that influence what actually happens in day-to-day politics. That is when lobby groups come into play. It's not the popular vote anymore. It's lobby groups, and they, it's people being able to pay the lobby groups. They are able to push politics in their direction, in the direction they want to see. And we don't have lobby groups, so you can't expect the day-to-day politics to change too much. So we have to be happy with what we get, and what we get is a change in discourse, and that our numbers increase massively. I mean, if you compare how many people listening to this, or how many people out there that you've talked to, or how many people that you watch on YouTube, or that you read, how many of them were actually active in 2013? And then you can ask yourself, well, if they weren't active in 2013, aren't you grateful that those people are active now? I mean, these are the kind of things that we have to appreciate, because it's like going to the gym. It's like if you think that just like short term, you go to the gym once and you think you're going to be ripped, or do you have to go? It's a long-term thing. You have to appreciate the small steps in the right direction. And I think that is, everyone is looking for the magic pill. Everyone is looking for the silver bullet. That's not how real success works. You have to appreciate small steps in the right direction, and changing discourse and making the left-wingers upset. That's one step in the right direction, definitely.
One last question from me. The Groyper movement in the United States, although they were certainly right about pointing out many false things around the Trump's administration and people surrounding him, for example, like Turning Point USA and so forth. Did they steal the momentum of Trump's movement, making many European or white Americans cynical about Trump, and even revanchistically voting for Biden, perhaps?
I think the whole thing with right-wingers voting for Biden, I think it's, a handful of people. I don't think it changed anything. I don't think their vote changed anything. I think Trump had lost momentum already. I don't think that the Groyper movement made Trump lose momentum. I think he's already lost it. And the Trump movement had already lost the momentum. And it's sort of like Trump he sort of kicked in the door to populism in America, right? I mean, this whole description of reality, this whole narrative where you have the elite interests versus the people, and now that is how we interpret politics. I think populism, and Kevin McDonald has also said this, that populism is here to stay. Many people have said that, but this movement isn't going away just because Trump is going away. The sentiments and the problems are still there, and we still have to solve the problems. And I think Trump helped us bring awareness to the problems. He didn't really help us solve them at all. I didn't think Trump was gonna keep any of his promises. He didn't. I mean, I think he was, in many respects, he was just he was just business as usual, and that's what I predicted already before he was elected. I thought, when it comes down to day-to-day politics, it's just going to be business as usual. The one thing that I had some hope for, and that's just because of Trump's own narcissism, the only thing that I had some hope for is that Trump would go after big tech censorship, because big tech censorship, that hurt him personally. And I thought that his huge ego would force him to, okay, well, I'm going to show you who's boss on this issue. But he didn't do anything. And that was my major disappointment. That was very disappointing. I didn't think he was going to do a whole lot about, immigration or anything like that. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't really think he did too much. But yeah, I understand why people are disappointed. When it comes to the Groypers, I don't think they took his momentum or anything. I just think that as far as the Trump phenomenon goes, I think he had done all the good that he was going to do. So I think he had sort of run out of steam when it comes to, his charisma and the enthusiasm around him in many ways.
Dear Frodi, any final thoughts?
Well, there are many final thoughts, but I think that the major thing that we have to understand is that these Trump winning or losing, it doesn't change a whole lot when it comes to what we have to do. What we have to do is we have to go after the fundamentals. What we have to do is we have to create a paradigm shift. We're not going to change this situation by going after one little detail here or there. We have to change the entire worldview, and that is a massive task. And like I've said, I see this more as a spiritual movement, a spiritual task. It's like a religious conversion of the entire society. It's like a paradigm shift for an entire society. That can take generations. It's not going to happen in an election. So I don't think people should invest too much hope or invest too much emotion in one election going this way or that way. Yes, we can appreciate the small victories, but when things go, again, I mean, now most of us wanted Trump to win again. He didn't, but that's not a huge deal. That's not a huge deal because he didn't change the fundamental problems. He brought attention to our issues. He created awareness around many topics, and I think that he was instrumental in boosting our numbers in many ways. But now we're going back. It's sort of like a pulse. It sort of expands and it goes and it contracts, and then it expands and it contracts. But the thing is that, if you look over a longer period of time, if you compare 2020 with 2010, we've still grown enormously. All of a sudden, we are a relevant movement. And it's like Jared Taylor has said that when he started working with American Renaissance, he saw himself mostly as, I'm just going to journal, the last protest from basically a dying people. I'm just going to show people in later down in history that at least someone protested against this. At least not everyone went along willingly. But now, with the growth of this new radical right that has been really growing over the last 10 years, he sees hope for actually changing things. And I do too, because there are so many things, so many factors playing into that, and the incompetency, the not political but ideological, just human ridiculousness of the left now, just makes it so that the intelligent people and the people with integrity will go over to our side. And I think small changes like that will play a huge role in the long run. So yeah, think in terms of paradigm shift. Don't think in terms of election cycles of 4 years. Think in terms of generations. Many people talk about the Jews being so influential in the West. How did they become influential? Well, because they worked hard for hundreds of years. They didn't get it magically. It's because they see themselves as part of a people who work over generations to improve their position. And it's only by doing that we can actually achieve anything. So don't invest too much hope or confidence in any election. Think for the long term.
Okay, two things at the end. Everyone check out Jewel Citizen says everyone Guide to Culture, Frodi's phenomenal site and channel. Yeah, do that, please. And I think Carlota Puch asked the question, when is Frodi streaming again?
I stream on Guide to Culture. Basically, well, most of the time it's twice per week. So every Tuesday evening at 10 p.m. Central European, 8 p.m. Sorry, 8 p.m. Central European time. Unfortunately, on Tuesday, we're probably going to start at 9 instead. But every Tuesday evening, my channel, Guide to Culture, and so we're going to talk about films. And then in the weekend, I'm probably going to have some other guests on, but every Tuesday at least. So you can go, if you follow me on Twitter, you can find, I announce all my live streams on Twitter and on the Telegram channel. So make sure to just follow me there. And guidetoculture.org is the website.
Great, Frodi. I thank you once again for accepting my invitation because I was so late. You made a great deed with this action. I thank you for that, and I thank all the viewers and all the guys that commented. Please stay tuned. Watch Frodi, listen to Frodi. Come back to my channel when I have interviews in English language, please. And have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Day. Okay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.